Very good. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Committee of the Whole for the District of Sechelt. It is Wednesday, September 13th, and it is 3 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. Council, any amendments or adjustments or declarations of conflict? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda, please, and seconded. All in favor? Carried. We go without further ado to item 5.1, and we have our Manager of Financial Services and Airport Wizard, Ms. Smith, to introduce our guest and perhaps give us a quick snapshot of what you've been up to.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce Robert Benyon from Operations Economic Inc. He'll be presenting to Council today the first of 4 presentations for the Airport Master Plan. This presentation will provide an introduction and an understanding of the needs and how this project will be developed. I'll pass it over to Mr. Benyon.
Literally, just move the microphone over. Good afternoon. You can press. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bev. And it's great to be here today. So my name's Rob Bainan, and I'm the president of Operations Economics Inc. and have the pleasure of being contracted by the district to develop an airport master plan. So I'm going to introduce who the company is, what we do, what an airport master plan is to some extent, because what the project is, and then some discussion of how it will develop and the steps we'll go through. I'm happy to take questions as we go as well. Well, of course, it's your decision how things proceed, but I am happy to do that. So presentation, mapping out the future, Sechelt Airport Master Plan intro. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Or maybe not. There we go. So what OEI stands for, Operations Economics Inc. So the company will be 10 years old next summer. And I've been in this field since the early 1990s. I actually did work on the parallel runway at YVR in the early 1990s, which has been there forever now. Helped with devolution of YVR into an airport authority, was involved when National Airports Program was being introduced in the early 1990s, and many airports in Canada were devolved to independent authorities and such. So I've been in the field a long time. I was the vice president at Intravista's Consulting, which is a fairly large company, about 75 employees based out of Vancouver. We used to be owned by a Dutch engineering company, Royal Haskoning and DHV. And after leaving there, I've been in this company, as I said, for approximately 10 years. And I've worked on large through small master plans. I've worked on YVR, I'm a project manager for Victoria and Winnipeg airport master plans. I've done planning exercises in Africa, Europe, and Oceania, as well as Canada. So I have some experience, and we want to bring it to this project.
Sorry, yes. Can you just pull the microphone a bit closer to you, please?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, just for the thousands of people on YouTube.
Okay, no, I worry about being too loud. So that's who we are. I have associates I work with, and I have a couple of engineering partners. On this one, we're working with Tetra Tech Engineering. With their Vancouver staff. It's a large US-based engineering company with about 10,000 employees, and they'll be supporting the project as well. So next slide again, please. So understanding your need. I just wanted to speak briefly to an airport master plan because airports actually fall under federal jurisdiction under Transport Canada. And all aviation in the world is actually guided by ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization standards. ICAO is a UN body, and it's based in Montreal, and it sets planning standards. Those planning standards are then taken by Transport Canada. And there is actually a planning document called TP312, which gives guidance on airport planning standards. So we're working in that context. Now within that, so that defines runways, aprons, taxiways, approaches, what can be done. Now, where municipalities have the most control is leased land or land development around the airport. And we'll be looking at everything. We'll be looking at the aviation systems, at the leased land, development opportunities and such. So I just wanted to give that background because I think it is valuable to understand the context this happens in it. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the vision of Sechelt Airport, and this came out of the RFP, and this is obviously open to discussion, but my understanding is you'd like to see increased activity at the airport, extension of the runway, taxiway, lighting, and terminal structure potentially, or new structures, explore leasing opportunities and revenue generation. So this was towards the beginning of the RFP and just reflecting back to my understanding of what the municipality would like to see. Excellent. And so this is the approximate project flow. Like we will be in consultation with staff and obviously with council modifying this, but it's approximately a 5-month process. I think it'll be a little longer because we're going to have Christmas in the middle there, and Christmas basically breaks things up a bit. So what we talked about is potentially having the final presentation maybe in February was my memory, Bev. So there's a lot of time there for discussion. As Bev said, I think it's 4 presentations to council to make sure that you're aware of the project, what's happening, what's being proposed and discussed, and you can comment on it. And it's basically a process of analysis, creating scenarios, creating drafts, reviewing them, and then coming up with a final plan. So final slide. That's my presentation. It's just a brief introduction at this point. I'd be happy to answer questions or speak to it. If there's anything else we said.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, questions at this early stage? I think we're getting our feet under on the runway, as it were. But please, Councillor Shepherd.
I wonder if you could tell me typical revenue generating ideas for small urban communities for this type of airport. What we typically find. Thanks.
Yeah. The ideas you're looking at, I think, are typical. There's 2 general types of revenues: aeronautical and non-aeronautical. And non-aeronautical is primarily leasing, lease opportunities. So we will be looking at lease opportunities. Aeronautical opportunities are opportunities related to aircraft flying in and out. And it's probably easier to make revenue quickly from leasing opportunities, and that is typical. And then employment related to aviation at an airport.
Okay. I have Councillor. Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'm just wondering if there will be a review of the service levels for the air commuter flights that are going out and the services that could be provided. Given that we have a lot of float planes and an airport, I don't think too many other places have this situation. Thank you.
Okay. So just so I'm clear about the question, you're looking for service levels for wheeled planes, like in and out of the airport. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Please.
Thanks. We will be looking. I described as scenario development and discussion. I have worked in Nanaimo Harbor and Vancouver Harbor on seaplane operations as well, and I was involved in planning the Vancouver Harbor seaplane base. I've also worked at YVR on the seaplane operations there, so I'm familiar with both. We will consider scenarios, and I think that's what I would describe that as, in what a range where we are and what could be. If that answers the question.
Great, thank you. For me, I guess I'm curious, you mentioned earlier about under ICAO, you're following TP 26 or whatever, 31. Anyways, the question really is it rigid? Is it really structured? Do we have any flexibility to try different things or to be innovative in what we might do with our airport?
Yes, you do. You have a lot of innovation. A general comment I would make is that Transport Canada over time has become more rigid. And that's something, maybe government in general is becoming more rigid in its application of regulations. But so in the past, you could make a proposal that was clearly outside the regulations and they'd listen to you. That won't happen anymore. They used to allow exceptions as well, and that's not happening anymore. You have things grandfathered, but I don't see any problems or any issues you have at your site because it primarily relates to approaches, the airspace, the geometry of the airspace above the airport, and then how runways are laid out, how taxiways and apron, like the infrastructure which we think of as an airport. The regulations primarily relate to that. And then after that, the only real concern is how close buildings can be to runways or taxiways, how high they can be in when they're that close to a runway or taxiway. But I don't think it'll impact your ability to develop things. It's just but they are regulations. They are regulations on what can be done or what is safe to be done.
So it sounds like there's limited opportunity for innovation within that rigid structure.
Well, I guess we'll have that discussion. Certainly, the US FAA, I would say, is much more open to flexibility, but I think there's a lot of room. And I think your site has a fair bit of land. So I think there's a lot of things that could be done.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Inkster, thank you.
Thank you. I initially didn't have a lot to say. I was waiting for the extra work to be done. But the way as we spend more money on the airport, i.e. the runway, etc., I would be looking for more ROI on the airport at that point. And we've always been looking for that, and we've always looking for ideas that you refer to. If in fact the existing model is not maximized, we look at, we'll use the word innovative, sure. But at this point, other than the flights that are going in and out and what we hope to happen, I see the airport lands, the lands connected to it as an industrial. I see it as an industrial zone. Other than what the runway is utilized for. So just based on the numbers of buildings and what could potentially happen up there in terms of.
So
Yeah.
industrial zone with an airport along one side? Is that?
Well, it depends on what happens. If you come to the airport and you go, a lot of people go left to the airport, there's what do we do with the land right in front? What do we do to the land to the right of that turn left? I've always wondered that could be going forward based on the fact that it's close to Field Road and the private ownership of the land nearby, a large industrial site. And I'm not necessarily saying industrial like smokestacks. I'm just saying industrial as an industry and
Perhaps
opportunities.
not airport is what you're.
Yeah,
saying.
not
Yes.
necessarily. Maybe in the future, as the community grows, the airport is utilized to bring in materials and or parts for those facilities that are located there. That's where the benefits of having an airport nearby comes in.
So perhaps the question is, is there a line within the airport, a proper airport that we cannot cross? Can we have smokestacks at the end of the runway?
Well, I think we can explore it. The one thing, it is subject to a Crown grant, and there will be limitations on what you can do there. And I don't know the details of that. But beyond that, one of the things we could discuss is, it is a land use discussion. So which aspects of the land need to be aviation focused and which could potentially be used for additional purposes? That's a discussion piece that we could have.
Right.
Well, that we will have. How's that?
I realized too, I didn't remind everybody, we have Councillor Bell joining us on Zoom. So I didn't see your hand up, so that's fine. If you don't have any questions, now I see your hand up.
Yeah, hello, I think you just mentioned that about looking at sustainability in terms of, anything future that may change in regionally and so on. So land use is one of the things that you're considering in your plan?
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Just a quick one in that we're going to be seeing you multiple times to committee of the whole or to council. And, I do see stakeholder engagement listed in here as part of the timeline. What do you have plans for engagement with the airport select committee on an ongoing basis or at a certain point through the process? Or, yeah, thank you.
Great. Beat me to it.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm not sure, is that for you or Ms. Smith?
I'm going to defer to Bev if she'd like to speak to it.
Well, you have to channel her because you've got the microphone.
Oh, right.
Thanks. Don't know if I should actually just sit down or stand there and say it, but yeah, the plan is that the committee would be involved with the master plan as well.
Okay, and that's over, if I recall, the next 14 or 16 weeks or something I saw on the one slide. So, okay, great.
If I could add to that.
Of course.
It is ultimately a planning process. And so we will want to receive input as appropriate.
Great. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I guess a little more of a request rather than a question is, if you could look as factors for us, issues regarding emergency preparedness. It's not really something we were so concerned about in the past, but it's a new concern. And also the flight paths and how they would have, where they would be. And so that communities know, what could be planned in those scenarios. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
You,
I'll respond to them one at a time. So
Yeah.
the emergency preparedness we'll definitely speak to. That's a very hot topic right now. Working at Oliver right now as well, and they've had enormous issues fighting fires in the last few years, and it's been a real strain on the airport and the surrounding area. Their airport is right in the city. And so you're talking about up to 400 or 500 people coming with equipment and basically camping there. And so I think it would be wise for all municipalities to look closely at airports in a relationship to emergency preparedness. So definitely do that. The flight paths is we'll talk to it. Flight paths fall under NAV Canada, and they're really, we can talk to what your flight paths are, but they are outside your control. You can I'll just leave it there because it gets very technical and complex. So thank you.
yeah, so it's prescriptive.
It is essentially.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, with our thanks, I guess we'll be seeing you again soon,
Yes.
and look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council, we will then turn to item 5.2, which is development timelines and missing middle bylaw amendments with our new, and I want to welcome our new senior policy planner, Mr. Kevin Pearson. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thanks for letting me speak this afternoon on the report that's in front of you. I've been working on this for a couple of weeks now, my first assignment, and it relates to a resolution that was passed in December of last year. And I'll read it, that staff bring back a report looking at possible mechanisms for zoning bylaw 580 and OCP bylaw 492, amendments to revert if construction has not commenced within a reasonable time frame. In my discussions with staff here, I soon learned what the issue was. It was a little bit difficult reading that motion and understanding where it came from, but it seems that there is a concern about land being rezoned and then either sitting there for a long period of time without any development activity, or the land being flipped over to a buyer, speculative zoning, in other words. So I looked at the procedures here in the district, and they mirror procedures in other municipalities for sure. They're consistent with where I came from. But little bits of differences, but mostly consistent. And the bottom line here with item 1 and the motion is that once a rezoning bylaw is adopted, it's there and it cannot be deleted. It can't be forgotten. It can't be erased unless a bylaw is repealed by council. And the repealing process is in itself a bylaw process. If a rezoning bylaw is repealed, then simultaneously another bylaw has to be introduced to council to rezone the property to whatever zone council wishes. Council does have a lot of power with rezoning. Council can rezone properties without an application from a landowner. Pre-zone properties. But there are limitations in terms of once a property is rezoned, a bylaw is a piece of legislation, and it does give the property owner rights to land use and density. So I can answer questions on item 1 in the report. I do talk about in the report on page 3 a number of reasons why delays occur, and these reasons are typical again throughout the province and the municipal and local government world. The applicant not following through with conditions for rezoning or development, requirements of referral agencies such as regional districts or provincial agencies, the volume of applications that are being under review in our department, development services, and market conditions that the district cannot control. There are options available that follow the procedural framework that's in place now. And basically, if we look at the rezoning and development permit process, which is Appendix 1 of your report, it outlines the general basic steps involved for a development permit application, form and character, usually following a rezoning. And that's a pretty normal process because an applicant is hesitant to spend thousands of dollars on detailed design drawings and hiring architects and this and that for form and character. Those type of development permits are reviewed by council for approval. Just as a heads up, staff has the ability to approve form and character development permits as well through a delegation process. And staff does actually approve certain kinds of development permits that don't go to council, such as the environmental and hazardous area development permits. The one option that I present in the report is to withhold final reading of a rezoning bylaw until there is approval of a form and character development permit. It's not rocket science. It's just actually inserting a process within the rezoning timeline. So that's one option. The other option is a phased development agreement. And basically those phased development agreements came in about 12 years ago, and they were a way for giving a applicant developer some certainty over the timeline on how long a zone remains in place, up to a maximum of 10 years. And in return, the district has more certainty and clarity on the amenities that will be provided to the district, along with the timing of development. My experience has been one phase development agreement for a large regional shopping center mixed use development. And that PDA phase development agreement expired just 2 years ago. So it went for the 10-year duration. But basically back to the idea that it secures zoning for up to 10 years. So in a phase development agreement, council could make it a condition that the rezoning only stays in place for 3 years. Which may spur the developer to get going and get with it and start building. The second item in the report, and this was not asked for by council, it was blended into the report because it does relate to item 1. And item 2 is about starting on some OCP amendments to increase density and accommodate more housing opportunities and possibly relaxing our policies just a little bit. And the report refers to several OCP applications and bylaws that have been approved by the district over the last 5 years. And basically an OCP should not, in theory, be amended so many times. So staff is proposing some adjustments, minor adjustments to floor area ratio, possibly eliminating the unit per hectare, the maximum unit per hectare prescription in the OCP. And they shouldn't really be prescriptions either, they're policies, whereas the zoning bylaws, your regulations. And also looking at the height to see if any of those 3 types of policies are preventing higher density, which we want for the missing middle, and the Housing Accelerator Fund application that we've applied for.
Okay. Thank you. Council, there's a lot in here. I think, just to make a point, I think this is before us for information. We're at committee. We're not particularly, short of giving some guidance and ideas on our views. We're not looking to approve anything or, so I welcome your thoughts and questions. Councillor Inkster and then Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks. Just a quick question. At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that zoning can be changed if in fact there's no development. And does that mean that, I mean, people use different words, but does that mean we can down zone?
Please, yes.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Yeah, we can down zone, but it's not easy and I think there can be consequences.
Oh, okay. So I guess that will be developed further because there's advantages to a municipality going back to an original zone because it allows us future bargaining power in a number of different areas, including, you know, our revenue creation. We don't have a lot of choices other than taxation and fees for revenue. So that's one of those. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just going forward, I was a little surprised these two things were combined into one report because to me, they're both quite significant and need special attention. But I was also wondering if you looked at the cost, if we have a cost recovery bylaw, if we would look at the amount of time our planning department spends on these applications, if we could just do a little analysis of what it truly costs us in that regard. And then maybe we, you know, if we kind of updated that as part of this thinking, it might be a bit of an eye opener, deterrent, and free up our planning department to do other broader planning things. Also, I would hope you could look at some other places that have had similar issues, like Gibson's had an issue with the George where they did change their zoning back and there was, so that would be a precedent I think you would want to look at.
I think that's all part of what this is about.
Yeah, I just want to let them know because it is more of a local context, which I think is important for us here on the Sunshine Coast. And then also other island communities like Salt Spring Island and Bowen Island, what kind of issues have they had there with servicing, especially and development for significant subdivisions, et cetera, especially with water issues like we have here, and they have similar issues. So if you could look at that, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks very much for the report. I'm broadly receptive to it. I'm anxious to see planning proceed on it. I think it's a response to the two things that we've asked for, which is a mechanism for down zoning, if you will, if development's not proceeding, and secondly, creating some efficiencies in the process in terms of densities. So I'm very supportive of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Something that jumped out in the report for me is we routinely ask developers for transportation studies and other localized studies. Have we ever, and this is a rhetorical question for now, but have we ever thought of doing our own transportation study for a particular neighborhood and then seeking recovery of that cost from future developers? So. Said rhetorical, so I won't ask for anybody to comment unless you wish to, Mr. Pearson.
Your Worship, I can try and answer that. That's a really good question, and it's something that municipalities do quite frequently. And in fact, the District of Sechelt has embarked on an active transportation plan. So that's an example. With the Housing Accelerator Fund, if we're successful with that grant application, there will be lots of money to study.
I just like the idea of doing it once, so for everybody's benefit. Councillor Tough.
Thank you. Wasn't sure whether I really wanted to chime in or not, but it's good conversation. I'm really curious about these phased development agreements. I think I've got to do some more research of my own offline to learn some more about them, because it looks like a good way to have that sort of last chance kick at the can. Like, I'm willing to support things that are providing housing for our workers and people who need to be here and things like that. But, you know, we so often we approve something and then we never see it. And whether that's market conditions or other difficulties or a company goes bust. And once we've done that rezoning, we've basically given away that density forever, or that project. And we see projects that will go through the process, and then the, you know, ownership changes and they go through the process again because it's not quite what they wanted to do. And I think there's good potential here. It just, like I said, I've got to do some more research offline. Thanks.
Okay, that if I may, that flags, like, why would we not encourage that to happen? You know, that like I don't particularly have a problem if somebody does all the work to put it through and then they happen to sell it and somebody else is a builder. I'm fine as long as it gets built. I'm not fine, as you've said, that then we go through the whole process to tweak it a little bit more. Something's missing in that. But the main thing would be to assess what other jurisdictions are doing. And you can.
Thanks. And prompted for that follow-up question. I'm wondering if you do have a couple examples of other jurisdictions that do use specifically phased development agreements that we can go look up or do some research on.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Good. That's an adequate answer for now, I trust. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that'll be part of a follow-up report. You know, that's what I think today is about, that, you know, we don't want to put Mr. Pearson on the spot for 6 examples right here and now, but yeah, Councillor Inkster.
It's a good discussion going forward, sort of a corollary to what Councillor Toth is saying. As an example, in Sechelt, how many properties have had zoning provided based on the work and the proposals they put forward, and how often that land has stood vacant, and then whether it is never developed on. We know of some examples. And also and these are valuable pieces of land, not only to the community for what they may become, but also to the plans, the community plan of the community and the value of those pieces of land. So interesting to see how many are taken up and or not done, or taken up and or a re-proposal is put forward with the additional expense of the new owner. So if you're saying in your last comment that this is information we are in conversation today requesting, I look forward to that information through to I don't know the gentleman yet.
Mr. Pearson.
Mr. Pearson, I can't see his name. Sorry, Kevin, I don't know you yet, but yeah, Mr. Pearson, if that's through you as a request, I'm looking forward to that information.
I think that's
and it's something I've talked to Director Allen about, is how we look at the growth of our community and how we get that information and the need for new people to do that work. So thanks.
very good. Thank you. Anything else, Council? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I would just like, in the next report perhaps, and I have a suspicion about this, but I need it confirmed, is if there is a substantial rezoning, but it's not a sale. I'm wondering if the taxation, if there's any benefit to the taxpayer of this. I mean, my impression is that there isn't until there is a sale. And then the value of the property goes to BC assessment. And then they say, oh, wow, now this property is not worth 600,000, it's worth $5 million. So, but until that happens, I don't really see the benefit to the community. And I just would like you to confirm that, because I think there might be an idea in people's minds that, oh, good, it's upzoned, so we're going to get more tax from it. It may not be the case.
Okay,
Thank you.
you raise a point I certainly can't answer. Does the rezoning trigger a reassessment by BC assessment?
Your worship, I
yeah,
can,
please, yes,
I can
Mr.
answer that
Pearson,
question.
we'll let the man with the microphone answer the question.
Your worship, when a property is rezoned, BC assessment is notified.
Right.
And they do take into consideration zoning.
Okay,
So the district would benefit from a higher taxation on a higher density zone property.
Right. I thought that was the case, but then when the Councillor McLaughlin mentioned building, so you don't have to trigger the building to trigger a change in assessment. Well said, Director Allen. Okay. Anything else, Council? Then I think with our thanks and welcome to the show, we'll move on. Yeah. So I think I'll ask our corporate officer, do we want a recommendation? We want a recommendation. All right. Would Councillor Toth like to make that recommendation? Or someone else? This is on page 4. Councillor Shepherd says he'll make that.
Yeah, I'll move that council proceed with the recommendation on page 4 as stated.
Right. Seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
I think anything as significant as this type of thing to the community should not just be another slight zoning update. I think it's so significant that it should be held off until we flush it out more and that we discuss this kind of issue and these major rezonings with the community, because it should be, you know, any major OCP change like this should be a thorough and broad and extensive community consultation item and not just be, I don't believe. And we are undertaking an OCP review fairly soon. I don't really think it's appropriate at this time to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I do support the recommendation and some minor bylaw tweaks, knowing that we will still have to go out to referrals and what have you. We can either lead this work ourselves, or we can wait for the province to just mandate it on us. And I think if we wait for the province to mandate it on us, we don't necessarily know what we're going to get. But if we lead off this process, we can turn to the province and say, look at what we're already doing. Leave us alone. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I sort of disagree. I think we should see what the province comes up with. They're supposed to give us information on policy this fall on it. And I've been waiting with bated breath. So I think we should hold off and we could just not, you know, spin our wheels needlessly, because if they want to impose it, they will, regardless of what we have. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking for others. I certainly would prefer to be master of our own destiny to the extent we can. So I think let's get on with it, and maybe we'll end up helping the province figure their way through this minefield by being first or second. Okay, anything else, Council? I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation as outlined on page 4. Opposed, Councillor McLaughlin is opposed. The motion carries. Council, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn, and seconded, and all in favor. We are adjourned. So return for questions.